This is our regular wrap-up session with a number of other activities going on in conjunction with his GEC. Wrap-up may be more of a misnomer than usual, but there are a couple of things we try to do in this session at each GEC. One is to have very short outbriefs. Because we run a multi-track conference, it's very difficult to see and participate and hear everything that happens. We're getting a little bit better because, as you know, nearly all of the sessions were webcasted, and the links are posted on the agenda pages. So if you are struck with an urge to go back and watch all of what happened in a session that you may have missed, that opportunity is available to you. So in order to inspire people to have that urge, we're going to have very short outbriefs, quick description of what happened in sessions you may have missed. Those will be by the GPO staff primarily. I'm going to summarize one session and then hand the microphone over to Vic, who will talk about some others. So on Monday afternoon, Manu and Ray and Devon and I hosted a session on vision for Genie Wireless. I put up one slide during the plenary session that showed one candidate approach to changing Genie's wireless strategy, or at least augmenting Genie's wireless strategy. We believe that we at least need to grow the size of our deployment. We need to chart a path towards moving to LTE. And we need to continue to support a variety of research styles, both relatively high-level hands-off and somewhat lower-level hands-on. And therein lies our challenge. So this was, I think the main outcome of this discussion is we held some debate on just how much variety Genie needs to support. And our challenge is to reach and state a community consensus so we can go forward and build the right thing to continue Genie's wireless infrastructure into the future. So that is my very short outbrief from the Genie Wireless Vision session. And Vic, maybe we'll save you having to hop up on the podium unless, oh, you do have slides. Okay.
Yes, so I have outbriefs from 3 sessions, or on 3 different topics: the Genie in the Classroom session, Experimenter Developer Roundtable, and on the tutorials. So the Genie in the Classroom session included presentations by Prasad Kalyam and Helena Marasevic describing their experiences using Genie in their classroom last fall. Prasad taught a cloud computing class. He used both Amazon Web Services and Genie for his assignments. And some of the assignments could not be done on Amazon Web Services, had to be done on Genie because they needed to use the Genie OpenFlow backbone, the hardware OpenFlow switches in the Genie backbone. Final projects, I think 3 of the 4, half the teams in the final project used Genie, and some used Amazon Web Services. They had a choice for their final project. Helena taught a class based on WiMAX, and the students learned firsthand the vagaries of wireless networks. That they found it quite frustrating at first, but over time understood the value of doing hands-on experiments with wireless networks. Both reported overall good learning experiences for students. The feedback they got was positive for the most part, and they both plan on using Genie again. Prasad plans on using it in an advanced cloud computing class, I think next semester. We also heard from Jay, Frida, and Mike about educational resources that are being built. We should, by the fall, have a good body of material ready. So if you plan on teaching a networking class in the fall, you might want to look at what's coming. Some of the material being developed is in the form of course modules. So these are not exercises. These are little videos and supporting material you can use to teach concepts such as TCP, the window sizes, and things like that. There will also be exercises you can hand out to students. And Frida described something she has today called Classroom as a Service. She demonstrated this at the demo session on Monday. So if you want to run a class, you contact her. She'll set up a web page for you, and you can have students run exercises from her website. It's you can watch their progress. It's very nice. You should. It was used last semester by Violet at Arizona State, so you can check that out. And in this summer, Thanasis and Frida plan on having a networking class for the masses in MOOC format. So when the announcement comes out, you can forward it to your friends and family. It's meant for people who know nothing about networking. They don't even have to be computer scientists or electrical engineers. So that'll be nice, interesting. The experimenter developer roundtable, we invited 5 advanced experimenters to talk about their experiences with Genie. These are experimenters using stitching, OpenFlow, resource-intensive experiments. The session was well attended by developers, which is good. There was a good discussion. And some of the common complaints from the experimenters were related to losing resources, mostly because they expired and they didn't get sufficient warning, and sometimes because things just, something went wrong at an aggregate. The other complaint was related to, so if something goes wrong, you lose a resource or a resource failed to come up, you have to start from scratch. You cannot just go add another resource to your experiment to make up for the resource you lost. And related to that is, once you have an experiment set up, you cannot, there's no easy way to grow it. There are ways to do it, but it's not easy. So that was another complaint. Another thing that experimenters thought would be very useful are standard OS images, so they know that if at every aggregate they can find a certain version of the operating system, of an operating system that they can use. They also expressed the desire for portable images, so images that they can carry from one aggregate to another. In terms of tutorials, we had 11 tutorials this GEC, 5 new tutorials. Arena, which is a non-IP based, it's a future internet architecture project based technology. Interaggregate experiments, which included stitching. SDN applications using Open Daylight. Open Daylight is a OpenFlow controller from an industry consortium. Distributed computing in Genie, so Hadoop in a slice, and finally train the admin. Many thanks to all the people who led these tutorials. It's always a lot of work and just organization, so thank you very much. Also thanks to Don and Russ. We had no networking problems that I know of, and so we could. So that made for a good, just overall tutorial experience, and also for meeting all our last-minute printing requests for tutorial instructions and so on. So thank you. I also thank the Exogenie and Instagenie teams for watching over resources, restarting things as needed at the last minute. So thank you very much. And this time we had more tutorials than any other GEC we have done. 11 tutorials, and this is not counting tutorials such as the interaggregate stitching that happened twice. It reflects the growing diversity of our experimenter community in terms of their interests and experience. So we offered a broader range of tutorials. And one of the reasons it was possible to do this many tutorials is the large number of resources we have now. We could run more tutorials in parallel without having to worry about resource conflict. Well, we had to plan it, of course, how we balance our load. We needed to worry about it. But it was possible to distribute load across aggregates. So that was nice. And well, if you started using Genie now at this GEC, you can continue to, you don't have to stop after the GEC. All the tutorial slides and instructions are or will soon be online, so you can try them at home. There's also the Genie tutorial at SIGCOMM that I mentioned on Monday. And there will be a Genie summer camp at Iowa State, most likely the last week of May, so starting the Wednesday after Memorial Day. So watch for an announcement about this, and as I said on Monday, there will be travel grants and stipends available to selected participants. And if you haven't joined the Genie users group, please do so. Ask questions, and also we'd love it if you can answer questions and help your fellow experimenters. And that's it. Thank you.
I won't put up the slides. This should be really quick. On Monday, we had 2 I&M sessions. The first one was our regular developer session. We went over the current status, what we've been working on since the last GEC, and what we've accomplished. The Gemini group has added several enhancements to the active measurements. There's a new blip console to give more visibility into what's going on with the blip measurements. They've added a NetLocker calipers wrapper that gives visibility and easy access to network and I/O socket calls on your existing application. So it allows you to easily add measurements to your current applications. They've been working on an active measurement scheduler. So it helps to schedule the measurements among your experiment so it doesn't duplicate some of the paths. Ezra's been working with the aggregates on some InstaGenie, ExoGenie common images. So we can take an ExoGenie image and turn it into an InstaGenie image very quickly. So we won't have as much image management. You don't have to worry as much about keeping track of both of those types. They've been working on some RSpec, making consistent RSpec extensions, and they've completed that so that we don't have different extensions for ExoGenie and InstaGenie now. Many enhancements to the Genie desktop to support RSpecs, support managing the AMs that are queried, filtering the output, and more visibility and error reporting. The iRods has been enhanced for slice membership. So previously it would push measurements as the slice creator. Now members of the slice can also push measurements for that slice and have it in their ownership. For GIME, they've big move from OMF 5 to OMF 6. There's now support for long-running experiments. So you can start an experiment, detach, and reattach later and still see your live graphs and keep that going. And as part of that, Nick has been working on a job scheduler, and that's what helps the running experiment piece of that. And this also allows using a single slice for a group of people, such as students or an experiment group, and scheduling experiments across those resources. So this is not the same as slice membership necessarily, although that helps that, but it allows you to run those experiments. It's not a one-to-one slice experiment mapping anymore. So there was a lot of discussion about that, which was really good. Denise Gherkin from University of Houston presented her students' experiences using GIME in their experiments and gave us a lot of good feedback on what we can improve and enhance for that. And both have successfully installed and tested their tools on an inter-aggregate InstaGenie ExoGenie slice. And of course, more support for racks, updated images, all that ongoing work there. So that's the basic stats of what happened, of what they've been working on, what new features are available, and then in the follow-on session was a demo session. They were able to demonstrate that. The next steps that they're going to be working on going forward, Gimmy's going to look into adding some topology integration to the lab wiki, looking, like I said, at the slice sharing concept that I talked about with the job scheduler, so scheduling experiments across a single slice. And they're also looking at starting some WebEx tutorials. We really want to increase the use of these tools, and we think that doing some WebEx tutorials, much like the Train the TA, Train the Admin, but specific to the instrumentation and measurement tools will help people get familiar and trained up on that. Gemini has been finishing up some active measurement integration with the Genie desktop. We'll continue to work on that, and infrastructure scalability, distributing the measurement stores and the lookup infrastructure to support larger scale. Multi-user slice creation support. There's some issues there with keys yet that we need to work out, and adding some more error reporting, user preferences enhancements to the Genie desktop, amongst other things. And both are going to be working on Speaks for integration. They're going to be working on documentation of components, and then so that we can take these environments and possibly duplicate them other places. And then further integration or better integration with stitching, including hopefully adding some WiMAX integration with the interact slices. And so that's the basic next steps. We had a lot of really good discussion, some new topics there. So, thanks.
Thank you. Good. Okay. So the Genie WiMAX developers meeting happened yesterday, and these are all the bullet points. The first thing to bring up was our conversation with Sprint happened. So this was the first time we talked to Sprint since Clearwire was bought by Sprint, and our master license agreement for Spectrum came under the Sprint purview. So all the WiMAX sites were told to update their site contact information because the Sprint folks are planning to do RF planning and site surveys to make sure that everything is still looking good and we're not interfering with them. Next thing was Davide and UCLA are planning to integrate the base station controller software to wean all the sites away from the Windows management system. So Davide is going to work with each site individually and update the packages and software that they've developed, and they'll be all installed on the console nodes of the yellow node setup that is already in place at all the WiMAX sites. I plan to work with all the WiMAX sites to integrate the data plane VLANs through the Genie rack. So there is a plane, and GPO infra is involved in that. We still have to come up with an actual design and contact all the sites, but one way or another, somehow all the WiMAX sites have received Genie racks, so this should be something that we should definitely plan on integrating, and all sites want to do this. Myself, Ivan, and Tim from the GPO will be working with the sites to move the point-to-point ad hoc internet to mesh of VLANs that we've been supporting for a really long time, now that AL2S is finally here. So a plan was proposed, and again, all the sites were in agreement, so we'll plan on working on that and make that transition happen. Ivan will be dividing and deliver. I was a little careful here because we have a pool of 90 Samsung Galaxy S2 handsets that are being ready to deliver to all the sites, so they'll be based on a need basis and experiments that are happening. We'll be sending out these devices, and they've also developed at Rutgers a custom application that supports the non-standard Genie frequencies that don't come pre-programmed in the WiMAX chipsets. So it's an Android application downloadable from the Play Store, and it'll be installed and sent along with the handsets to all the Genie sites. SciYNet, Jim Martin and team presented their status of the experiments that have been going on. They are supporting 7 different experiments, and they have 25 devices that they've already distributed. They will continue to support the experiments and are also trying out this BYOD, bring your own device model, that'll work on their MVNO network with Sprint. Freda Fund, as you heard from Vic, discussed the Genie in the Classroom module that she's delivered. She used that at the WiMAX tutorial, and I think it was pretty successful, gauging from the tutorial feedbacks that I happened to glance on. And she's actually looking for more campuses, so I will solicit more campuses here on her behalf. But I'm already in contact with Columbia to use Genie WiMAX Classroom modules next semester. Suman Banerjee has this very cool YSense app, which basically makes your phone a spectrum analyzer, and he's expressed interest to pre-program all the Genie handsets to have his application running on that, so he'll be working with Ivan to make that happen. Now the not so good news, our Intel 6250 WiMAX cards have connectivity issues which were brought up by most campuses, but we have a ticket with Airspan, and we hope that this issue gets resolved. This is sort of a mini roadblock. We do have other devices that work, but Intel 6250 is one of the only devices that works on Linux, so it's important for us to fix this. And Ivan plans to integrate OpenID into the OMF login service, which again runs on all the console nodes that are at all Genie WiMAX sites, which will finally allow us to integrate WiMAX sites into the portal. We have a basic deployment, but we don't want to make it live until OpenID is available. Thank you.
At the Genie operations session, we dedicated more than half the session to discussing possibilities for SDN exchanges. The good news is there's a lot of interest, and there looks to be compatible data plane ways of dealing with data plane connections. There are potentials to connect with testbeds in Brazil, in Europe, and to do more exchanges with ESNet than what we've done in the past. So that's very exciting and a little challenging to branch out that much that quickly. But we're going to be following up on those discussions post-GEC and seeing what we can do about taking more concrete steps for that. We also did the usual updates on monitoring and on plastic slices experiments, although unfortunately the plastic slices is on the wiki page and wasn't actually presented because we ran out of time from all the other discussions. But I would encourage you to go and look at the presentations that were attached and at the live video streaming to see what was happening in operations. There is currently 2 presentations that are missing from that wiki page. You know who you are, and I will haunt you, so please get those posted or email them to me. Thanks.
So I do have a few slides, but I promise to be brief about them. Here we go. So there's 2 sessions I'd like to review. The First was yesterday afternoon, we had a session on towards the programmable WAN, and then this morning we had a session on the developer topics. Again, I'm going to go briefly. I'm going to say a lot less than what's written here. These will be up on the wiki. We had 5 different presentations at the programmable WAN session. The first was Nick Baston talked about VTS, the Virtual Topology Service. There's a prototype that he's been working on, and it shows a lot of promise. There's a lot more tooling to be done and a lot more in the way of switches, but essentially this is a capability that allows you to allocate a fully programmable segregated network space. So it's a very exciting proposition that we'll all be following. Eric Boyd of Internet 2 talked about fundamentally the flow space firewall capability, the ability to have multiple controllers share control of open flow switches in the Internet 2 network space. He thinks of this as sort of having 2 roles, one slicing by VLAN and the other protecting the resources. And so there's policies and processes by which an experiment can be put into the Internet 2 network, and we talked about those as well. Rick McGeer gave a demonstration and talked about the plans for G, the Genie experiment environment. It's a simple environment for distributed experiments. Their motto is doing an experiment in 5 minutes from beginning to end. And in fact, he showed us a small experiment in literally just 2.5 minutes, and that was padded. I mean, it's a very simple environment. It's based on Planet Lab slices. Currently, the compute service is in place, and their next steps are working on the storage and messaging services. Joe Mambretti of iCare talked about software-defined exchanges, and he talked about some of his experiences in petascale science prototypes, the services facility, and making that programmable, and a lot of the concepts about high-performance SDX enabling SDN traffic across different domains. And Jerry Sobieski talked about NSI and his experience in Giant in crossing domain, having programmability across different administrative domains and control domains. He points out that there's a lot of parallels between the NSI APIs and architectures and what we do in Genie, and that we would all benefit from close comparison and collaboration. To the developer topic session, we had a number of different, this is sort of a grab bag of different topics. Brecht Vermeulen talked about a number of things that, first of all, he gave a demonstration of the JFED tools, which not only probe a lot of the Genie services and aggregates, but also they've got tools for resource allocation and management, simple experiment control. And they speak the Federation and the common APIs that there's. We talked a little bit about the Federation API, which is currently in use in some of the Genie services, and the ongoing plans for the Genie aggregates, a Federation aggregate API, which is based on the Genie AM API v3. And he points out that Fed for Fire is starting to support and encourage federated experiments, so that as of about February. Mikiyashi Hayashi of KDDI, part of Aki Nakao's lab, gave a presentation on the slice exchange point and the Common API v2. He reviewed the document and some of the concepts of it, showed some of the progress that's been made since they first proposed the concept of GEC19. There were demos at GEC17 and 18, connecting vNode and ProtoGenie, and it's an effective way of making slices transparent across different infrastructures through this common API. Tom Mitchell talked about the benefits of the Federation API, particularly from the perspective of tool developers, that having this common API will allow tool developers to write code once and point it at different clearinghouses. Aaron Helsinger talked about some open API, AM API change requests, and we ratified a number of them. I'm not going to go through them all here, but these are ones that are already sort of in place and have been sort of tacitly agreed to, and we've sort of formally agreed to them. And there were other proposals that were discussed, but their status was deferred to the coding sprint, which will be this afternoon. Aaron also talked about some issues about we have stitching. We want to improve its usability and reliability. The first thing he advocates for, and I second that advocacy, is to finish off the two-phase commit that's implicit in AM API v3 to allow for efficient VLAN negotiation. We want to have standardization of error codes and error handling within the stitcher to make it more friendly to users. We want to add friendly stitching user interfaces into some of the evolving tools, into the Genie desktop, into JAX, the portal, and so on. We want to provide support for stitching to an aggregate, which will provide something like multi-point support. We want to work on integrating OpenFlow support into the current stitching architecture, and building an AL2S AM the minute AL2S is ready for that. Tom then talked about the road for SpeaksFor. We've got a SpeaksFor capability that is, we decided that we wanted to have by this GEC to have the frameworks, the frameworks, SFA and Protogenie and the GPO frameworks supporting SpeaksFor, and then by the next GEC to have the aggregates so that the tools would then, by GEC21, all be able to speak SpeaksFor and sort of close off this loop. And then there were two presentations that I literally only showed the title slide for, but I'd be glad to talk to anyone about them offline. One was about our experiences in using ABAC as our authorization mechanism for implementing the GPO Federation services. And the second was a challenge to take capabilities from a lot of the tools that already exist to allow for scaling experiments from very small proof of concepts to their large natural sizes. And I'd love to talk to people, and we expect to talk about that at the coding sprint as well. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, so usually at this time we have a bit of Q&A on the topic of how are we doing, in particular how are we doing with the organization of GECs. We're going to defer that today because we have a session about that I'll mention in a minute. And I'd just like to say a few words of wrap up. First, I'd like to once again thank our hosts here at Georgia Tech. There were some very striking phenomena at this particular GEC. So each GEC, day one, as we start the second morning session, all of the GUPO people will grit their teeth and prepare for the catastrophic networking failure somewhere in the wireless system that is going to delay the first set of tutorials by half an hour while we scramble and get the hotel IT staff to fix it. Well, my teeth are still gritted. I'm waiting for it to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. I believe this is the first time since we really started a significant tutorials program that it didn't happen. Thank you. I've noticed many rapid room switches in this very space that were not helped at all, I think, by our sometime failures of time discipline. Thank you. Several people came up to me and said the food was good. That's never happened before. Thank you. And the coffee all the time thing, that seems to work very nicely. So I think, GEC19, both as a milestone in what we're achieving technically in Genie, in the number of collaborations we have going, and in the GEC logistics. What a very good GEC. I'm really very excited. Which means, of course, that our next GEC at UC Davis, Ben and Felix, have a standard to live up to. So thanks very much, Ben and Felix, for agreeing to host. We look forward to being in Davis, and you have a tough act to follow. I do want to remind people, as you're making travel plans to come to Davis, of two facts. One is we are coordinating this GEC with the US Ignite Summit that is immediately afterwards in the Bay Area. So think about that as you make your travel plans. So that's at the back end of your travel plans. At the front end of your travel plans, remember that we are experimenting with a new GEC format, so you, depending on your interests, you may or may not want to show up for the very first half day. We will try to get that agenda published a bit earlier than usual so you can make your travel plans intelligently. Okay. Now for the list of things that are the very last words. If you brought a poster, it's up, out, and back. Please remember to take it with you. We don't know what to do with them if they stay here. If you are interested in talking about future GECs, both modest adjustments we can make within, roughly speaking, the existing GEC format in the medium to near term, or if you're interested in talking about how we're going to transform the way that this community meets as we move to the phase of Genie that is post the kind of rapid development and intensive development that we have now, that meeting will happen on that half of this room. So if you're coming to the brainstorming session, go out, grab a box lunch, give folks a few minutes to split the room in half, and then we'll meet over here. If you are not going to the brainstorming session, please do not get a box lunch. Please go back downstairs and have lunch where we've been having lunch before. The split ought to support us if we follow those simple instructions. I hope many of you are staying for one of the co-located events, to attend the coding sprint, to come to the brainstorming session, to attend the GREE workshop. So I hope to see a lot of you over the next day or two. For those who are heading out, thank you very much for coming. We'll see you in Davis in a few months.